Hi, I'm Maxine Berman. Welcome to Stateside. I'm here today with a group of students from Southfield Lathrup High School, and we're going to be talking about giving public money to private schools. Let me start by explaining, first of all, that this is a constitutional issue. It's not just something the legislature can make a decision on. In other words, we can't really vote on it. We could put it on the Constitution, but since the Constitution right now says that state tax dollars cannot go to fund private schools, which would include the parochial schools, the only way to change that is by a vote of the people. And that can either happen in one of two ways. Either a group can go out and petition and get enough signatures to put it on the ballot, or the legislature, by a 2/3 vote, would put it on the ballot. That probably won't happen. It would probably have to be by signature. But anyway, the issue may be on this November's ballot, because there is a group out there called Teach Michigan that wants very much to have parochial aid, what it's often called, or a voucher system. And what do you think? Should public tax dollars go for people who want their children to be in private and or parochial schools?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't agree with it. I think that public tax dollars should go towards public schools. And I think when it gets to the point when you say, well, you want your child to have the best education, that's when you should talk with the government and help make the public education system better. You know, you take those dollars and then you help make it better rather than giving it to a privately funded, usually privately funded educational system.
Right, because it seems like the private schools, they are more well off than the public schools as it is. So why give more money to the private schools to fund them when there's so much stuff that the public schools need still?
Private schools are there. I mean, it's definitely, the kids from private school are definitely in a different class than those that go to a public school in most cases. And the education system is totally different. Like if you take a student from Country Day or, you know, Cranbrook and compare them to someone that goes to Lathrop, you can tell that their education system is completely different. Whether it's better or not depends on what you think of it, is one's own opinion. But that would, if you were to give, you know, money, public funds to private aid, then, you know, a lot of other kids would be going to private schools more than likely, and that would kind of be taking away from the separate group. I think a lot of parents send their kids to private schools because it's kind of separate. It's kind of in their own world, and it's kind of quote-unquote special. And a lot of people would think that that would be taking away from that as well.
Well, most private schools are parochial. In other words, they're religious schools, which is another problem or issue basically here. And Teach Michigan, I think, would probably say that their main goal is to be able to fund for parents to send their children to religious schools, be they Jewish schools, Catholic schools, Lutheran schools, whatever they happen to be. And that's, you know, I mean, the country days of the world are so far above. I mean, the tuition for the regular parochial schools are usually much lower. Let me throw out an argument that people use very often, where a parent whose child is in a private, let's say a parochial school, says, look, I'm paying property taxes, and a goodly chunk of those property taxes, probably 2/3, are going to fund parochials, to fund public schools. My kids are in a private school. How come I'm paying property taxes to fund something that I'm not getting any benefit from?
Because your child has the opportunity to go to a public school. I mean, like, you have to pay taxes in America no matter what. It's just the law. You know, we don't get everything that the taxes entitle us to. Like, there are probably some special stuff that we don't get because we live in a certain area or something like that. We don't have an empowerment zone in Southfield, and Detroit does, but we still pay taxes for that to help it. Just because you pay taxes to it, I mean, you're entitled to, like, have it, but you don't have to.
I mean, is there so unjust about having to pay taxes for schools that their children don't attend? We'll just send them to the schools that they're paying, that they're funding.
Yeah.
I mean, that just makes sense.
Well, all right, let me look at it. Let me give you another argument. They're attached to the parochial issue, and what's probably going to be more commonly talked about, just rather than an actual giving to the parochial school, is going to be what's called a voucher system, where, in other words, a parent receives from the state a voucher for whatever amount of money it is. I don't know what it would be. And anybody could get one and then take that voucher to whatever school, public or private, and say, here, you know, this is my voucher. The state will give you X amount of dollars, 5,000, 6,000, whatever it happens to be, and now I want my child here.
I think that would cause major, major problems because one, who decides how much money they get, and two, different school districts, they spend different amounts of money on different on the schools. So how would you determine, you know, well, you live in Southfield, they spend $9,000 here. Do you get $9,000, or do you just get the average and then you have to make up the other? And what if you're really poor and you want to use that money, so you go to a school that spends $3,000 per student, then do you get to keep the extra $2,000?
Also, kids that feel that their school district isn't as, you know, up to par with other ones might all flock to the same districts, which would cause a problem, you know, because they may feel that say the violence in their school is too high. Well, if you get a lot of kids all going to one school, it's going to be overcrowded and things aren't going to run as smoothly anywhere.
Right.
And besides that, like, if a school has books and teachers and the kids should be able to learn, you should be able to get the same quality education, whether you're in a small shack schoolhouse or a great building, you know, it's all up
but
here.
You're bringing up, I'm still sitting here playing devil's advocate, because I ain't voting for this sucker. But anyway, all right, but here's another argument, okay, and I want to throw them out. There are a lot of youngsters, I mean, it would be nice to think that if you're in a small shack school district, you're getting the same education, but the chances are you probably aren't. I mean, whether or not they lack equipment like computers or whatever. One of the arguments would be, for example, that there are, well, if any of your parents wanted to send you to a private school, let's say a $3,500 private school, and that's probably, I mean, there are a lot of them, it would probably cause some budget strain, but they could do it if they wanted to. And they have chosen not to. They like the system they're in. There are a lot of children whose parents cannot come anywhere near $3,500, who are very poor, who are not in good school systems, or who perceive that they're not in good school systems, let me put it to you that way, who say, you know, who, if given the opportunity to go to a private school, for example, let's not even say they're going to another public school, but to go to a Catholic Central or a Shrine out in Royal Oak, which are considered pretty good schools, or a Mercy out in Farmington, and would take that opportunity. But because they can't come anywhere near affording them, then, you know, it's out of reach for them. And so the argument is, one argument is that poor children would have an opportunity to go to private school and maybe a better school.
But they, instead of doing something like that, they need to modify the schools that they're trying to get away from. You know, instead of just giving them money to go somewhere that's better, then why don't you improve the school that they're in?
If something's broken, you don't just throw it out, you fix it.
You should try to fix it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think maybe it sounds unfair, but possibly those kids who are, you know, who are excelling in the school systems that aren't up to par, maybe they can test, you know, and according to maybe a certain level or what score, maybe then the government can step in and say, well, we will give you $2,000 towards education at a private school, or we will grant you permission to go to a public school, which is better, maybe like a CAS or a Renaissance, that type of thing. Or, I mean, then parochial schools, I know some of them they give financial aid. They give partial scholarships.
Many do.
So, like, if you put those two together, maybe that'll help you.
Are you
know?
talking about the best students in those schools?
Well, not the best students, but those who test high enough, maybe, and maybe those who want to leave and go to another school district, then maybe should test and see how high, you know, their score is, to see maybe is it worth the government giving them more money out of their pockets, you know?
Like
it may be partially unfair, I'm not sure.
Also, like in some school districts, like I know in like the Berkeley and Oak Park and Hazel Park, I don't think maybe they don't have enough money to have like their own, each individual school have their own like, AP classes or whatever. So they go to this place called CASA, and it's like a collaboration between like 4 or 5 school districts, and it's cheaper for the school districts, and there they can take like AP classes and stuff. So maybe if the school districts, that don't have as much money, they can all, like 5 of them could all form together and get this like new little learning place for maybe the advanced kids. Or
CASA is a real good program, and there are several of them around. Actually, there's one out, or there used to be one out with several school districts teaching Japanese because none of them had enough kids, but they wanted to offer the program, so they do that. And those are basically magnet programs. They're not magnet schools, and they work really well. There's a concern. What you're talking about, Janetta, is actually being talked about in some places, and has been a concern in even what we call schools of choice, which is a different issue, which we won't get into right now, is what happens when the best of students leave a school. You're still going to have a school. In other words, there's still going to be X amount of students left, and you're kind of what we call creaming, which is always taking the best, off the top and leaving, like, warehousing other kids, and that becomes a real problem, though it might end up happening that way. There are a lot of people, though, in fact, there were polls recently that showed that I think someplace in the high 40 percentile of people thought it wasn't such a bad idea. 20 years ago, everybody thought it was a terrible idea. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen with it. But there are a lot of people who strongly believe that education is education. And if we're paying to educate, we should pay to educate. There's another issue that nobody talks about is transportation. There is no money for transportation. Right? So if you're very poor and you get a voucher to go to whatever school is over there 20 miles away, you'd better have a way to get the kid there, because we aren't paying for it. And it would be a monster problem.
I think a lot of people overlook, it's one thing just to be able to go to the school, but like Maxine said, there's transportation, and once you go to the school, let's say somebody from, like, let's say one of us, we went to a private school that was really expensive because we had the voucher. And with scholarships and our parents' funds, we were able to go. I mean, a lot of private schools do a lot. Things within their school that we would normally not do in our own public school, like trips, and or like another school might, that doesn't receive as much funds from the government. Maybe they don't take trips to Europe, like kids in our school do, and maybe they don't, have a lot lot to,
You're taking a trip to Europe?
I mean, some kids did.
Oh.
Alicia went to
did.
Spain. Alicia went to Spain.
Gee. I'm sorry, I didn't even recognize that. Maybe I should go back to teaching.
I mean, like kids, kids in other school districts can't afford to do that. And if they come to the school, then there's going to be problems. Like getting along with the kids, you're going to be going to school with kids that are totally, not like you. And
Also,
there's
I mean,
more
the
problems after
performance level of the student is going to a different school going to make them perform better in school and their tests and stuff. I mean, I don't know, the poor, so to speak,